Hi, and welcome to the Beacon House podcast. My name is Helen Townsend, and I work for Beacon House as their media and resources coordinator, therapeutic life story worker, and a peer supporter. As an adoptive parent, I'm intrigued by the many ways our multidisciplinary team support our clients. This week I'm having a conversation about curiosity with Dr Kathryn Whyte, clinical psychologist and our Chichester team lead. You can find more information and all our free resources at www.beaconhouse.org.uk and follow us at Beacon House Team on Facebook and Twitter. Enjoy the podcast.
I've always been interested in that idea of curiosity. And I think, like we were saying earlier about different concepts meaning different things to different people, for me, curiosity is one of those ones that means something different to everybody. But it's really hard sometimes to pin down.
Yeah.
So I think, what am I trying to say?
What does it mean to you then when you say?
Well, I suppose, so I have been really influenced in the Dan Hughes sense of the word.
Yeah.
It's that idea of having a deep interest. So it's not about finding out why at all. In fact, sometimes that's the end result. But it's much more about how and motivations and what's inside. So it's like having a deep interest in the insides of people. So what's going on in their mind? I don't know. It's a really hard thing to think about. I'm trying to think about examples,
but I think that's as parents we can be very focused on the curiosity that leads to the why at the end, rather than the kind of bigger picture.
Yes, and that is important. It is important sometimes to get to the end and understand the kind of the why, but you don't get there by asking why. I suppose that's the difference.
Journey around that.
So when I talk with parents often about using curiosity, they will often think that you have to just ask why a lot, and that's a shortcut because that's what we think. You ask a question, you want to know why, so why wouldn't you ask why?
Yeah.
And of course, all children, but particularly the children we're working with, often don't know themselves, so they need us to give them a pathway almost. To the why by thinking about what's inside, almost giving permission, I suppose, to say whatever. So you're not. Why sometimes I suppose suggests that there is an answer, whereas this kind of curiosity is much more about there isn't an answer. There are lots of answers. There's lots of information going on inside that will help us to know why. But it's not you can't get it wrong.
No.
That's the thing. That's what I've been trying to say.
And if you have a child that has body memories rather than cognitive memories, that curiosity becomes, I suppose, even more important.
Yes.
Because actually they don't know why either.
No. And it's there's no wrong answer. I think that's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
So you have to ask your questions and hold the curiosity in a way that's really clear to you, but also the person you're talking with, that they can't get it wrong.
And how do you do that in therapy?
So in therapy, I suppose you start off by being interested as you can without being cliched or overbearing in every little thing that the child might say or do. So not making assumptions or not letting them think you're assuming what's important and what's not important. But every now and again you might just say, wow, that I don't know, you might think like that, or even about how they chose which shoes to wear or whatever. Just having that kind of deep interest in all aspects. It's got to have layers, I think.
Yeah, so you're not turning it on and off for the things you think are significant.
No, it's got to be embedded in throughout the whole conversation, and it starts as soon as somebody walks in the clinic door, not just the therapy room door. It's about it's
that walk to the room.
Yeah, and then the other people in the team here will tell you that I've got an irrational slight obsession over the biscuits and how many biscuits people eat and who chooses biscuits, and I'm forever kind of prevaricating about we shouldn't have so many biscuits and all this. But I have also had great fun being curious with children and their parents about the flipping biscuits. So just about how are you choosing? Because some children could spend 10 minutes in front of the biscuits choosing which biscuit to have, and that in itself is irrelevant, really. Although it can be quite interesting watching how parents and children negotiate.
Well, yeah, definitely.
But I found out all sorts of things about how children's minds work by asking them and being interested in how they're deciding which biscuit to choose. I mean, it's ridiculous, but...
Oh, no, but it was also a very safe way of exploring that idea.
Yeah, it is. So if you start right then by not judging, but by saying, I'm interested in your biscuits as much as I am about the fact that you had terrifying things happen to you when you were little, and also what music you like, and whether you're good at gymnastics or football.
I'm interested in you as a whole rather than the thing that happened. Yeah,
so it conveys that, and for me it just frees children up in a way, and parents actually, because I personally find it harder to do with parents, but working on it still to think about that too, to be as equally curious and non-judgmental about what choices they make in the here and now as to how they imagined it would be to be an adopted parent, and how it's different to what they imagined. And usually parents will really, I think, respond to that open stance, that curiosity, and tell you all sorts of things that it's a real privilege to hear.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it really sets the tone for trust, I think, that kind of I'm interested in anything and everything you've got to say. Yeah. And that's as important to me whether you had cappuccino or tea this morning as whether you screamed at your child last night.
And of course, those kind of things are quite scary to admit to a professional.
Yeah.
So if you can make it safer by being curious about the whole, then maybe that then takes them to a place where they can say, I'm having these really bad thoughts about this.
Yes. And I think it's not that it's okay. It's not okay to scream at your children, or certainly not okay to hit them.
No, but if you can't
explore that, absolutely. So it's not
how
about
can they resolve it?
Not saying some things aren't okay, because some things aren't okay, and it's not okay for children to hit their parents either, and all that. So it's not about not judging the behaviour, I guess, because some behaviour isn't okay. But it's about not judging the motivation, the person, what's led them to that.
Exactly.
And
what about, how does then that translate from therapy to home? Because it's really, it can be so tricky. It's tricky to parent anyway. And then when you're dealing with a level of trauma in the home, being curious when you're being attacked all the time, or a child is shut down all the time. It's probably too big a question, but how do you start to encourage parents to be curious when perhaps they are not in a place where they can feel curious without the judgment?
No, okay. That, I think, is a brilliant question. It starts in the therapy room, so you would hope that you'd be seeing parents without their children first. You would practice it with them, I guess. You would notice it. I always ask them to practice it with each other if it's a parent couple, or practice it at work even, because it's not a bad thing to do with anybody, to be properly interested in all parts of people in your life is brilliant. And then, but sometimes, a bit like we were just saying before when we were talking about the waiting, and how waiting is sometimes an active thing, sometimes the curiosity has to be inside. You can't let it come out your mouth.
Yeah,
I suppose.
Okay,
so it's while you're in that, if your child's locked in, or if your child is in a particularly aggressive phase right then speaking the curious stuff out loud
it's not going to help.
Might not help. They might not be able to tolerate that. And I suppose but if you're curious inside, you're thinking, okay, what is my child going to think about what I'm going to say? it's a bit like that mentalizing as well.
Yeah.
So if you combine it, so really with a lot of training, therapists and parents are really able to think, if I say this out loud now, what will my child hear? Because that's different to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So if your child in that moment hates you, and you say, I don't know, something which in your mind is designed to convey your empathy
and love,
and love, all they're going to think is, do they think I'm stupid? Why are they telling me this stuff right now when they can see that I hate them?
So we've made a resource at Beacon House where we did what you say, what I hear.
Yes.
So that's almost taking that a step. That if the child is what am I trying to say? I think that's really interesting because actually, if I take that curiosity a step further, what we're going to say, what we're going to hear, it's almost that next bit of the translation in their brain is, that makes total sense.
So that lots of my best sounds a bit arrogant, but my most fruitful, let's say, conversations with parents have been on that subject.
Yeah.
That idea that even though their intentions are good, and the words that they are saying, if I heard them or you heard them, we'd think,
sound lovely.
Nice, well done.
Yeah. That's a good piece of therapeutic parenting.
How smart I can feel. Then their child is hearing different words because they're different intent. They're making a faulty assumption about your intention.
Yeah.
And once you've understood that, I think that can be it can be quite revolutionary for some parents. That no matter what they say, at the moment their child is not hearing it with the same intent. It has a different function.
There is a waiting curiosity. That is an active piece of parenting.
Yes. That happens in your brain, inside.
That is you doing something. It's not you not responding, and it's not you being frozen. It's you being actively curious, but not externalising it in that moment. Because
and you might save it up for later.
Yeah.
Again, loads of parents do good post-it note therapy.
Tell me about post-it note therapy.
And I know parents who've done like lovely little journals and things. So they swap a book with an older child usually. But you've got to set that up. That doesn't happen by accident.
No.
You need to
Please tell me about that. That sounds really interesting.
So that's, in fact, a parent taught me that, which most of my best things have come from parents teaching me over the time. But she just had an idea that her daughter found it so hard to talk face to face. And actually that young person was also had difficulties on the autistic spectrum, so it was even harder for her. Yeah. But what she could do and felt quite comfortable doing was writing things down.
Okay.
And so they just they called it a chat book, I think, or a talk book. So it wasn't talking, but it was.
Yeah.
And it would just be in a safe space where other people in the family didn't naturally come across it, but it would just go from one place to the other. And
so they would take turns.
They would take turns. It would be reciprocal. It was a conversation, but it just wasn't spoken out loud. But it also gives you, as a parent and the child, a bit of a delay.
Yeah.
To use your brain.
Yeah, it is to put it back in place.
Yeah. And to use that waiting curiosity thing where you've been mentalising almost, where you've been thinking, okay, what will my child hear if I let these words come out of my mouth? Yeah. How can I say it differently? It might also have given you a chance to talk with your partner if you're parenting together about, this is the thing I want to say to our daughter, our son. Help me, because then it can be collaborative. It might only be one person writing, but that's part of the kind of active waiting curiosity thing as well, as sharing it. So exploring the ideas with the other parent. Yeah. So that then you're giving a kind of a more, I don't know, a more together response, a more complete response. Yeah. Because sometimes if you're the one who the child's been screaming hate at, it's harder to maybe to use your kind of mentalising abilities at that time. So if you wait or you share it with your partner, as long as they're keeping empathic with you, then I think that really helps.
And a page is quite containing for everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, very. Yeah, I mean, not some big A4 thing, even just like a little journal. I mean, you can buy them as well now. You can buy. I've seen them for girls particularly, mum and daughter books. I haven't seen them, but like journals that are again designed
even just a little A5 sketchbook.
Absolutely. And sometimes it'll be pictures. Sometimes you might get a big old fat swear word in the middle of the page. It's a communication. It's coming back
and
to that.
judgment. It's absolutely. Not. We're not doing this if you're going to swear. No, it's anything goes. Yeah. That you need to say.
Anything goes. You've got to be able to tolerate that. Yeah. As a parent, you need to kind of have enough support in whatever or internal resource, a mixture of both, preferably. Yeah. To tolerate the fact that you might open the book and see swearing or
it might
hatred.
A page might be destroyed.
Yeah. Or equally, it might say, "I love you, but I can't. I know I can't say that, and I'm sorry I can't say that." And that then becomes that parent's most precious page, that they've ever seen. So, in many ways, I wouldn't want people to hear me saying, "Stop talking to your child," instead write everything down.
No, but it is talking, isn't it?
It's just
a less direct
for some children and parents. And some parents really struggle in the moment.
And the intensity of it, and taking the intensity out of it.
And I use it in therapy sometimes too. Yeah. Because with some children, in the heat of a therapy session, it can be pretty intense too. So to take some of the intensity out of that, swapping notes. I've got one young person who kind of hides and passes notes out between parents and I, and it's great.
That's still communicating.
It's all communication. It's like you were saying about that comic strip resource that you made. And I think it's really powerful, that idea, and the iceberg. So that it's the same idea, just in a different format in my head anyway. And I think they work so well in helping people to really understand that what you see isn't all that there is, and that communication has got all those different layers.
No, I think it's fascinating, and I always think about permission, giving people permission to do things differently, and just because you're not doing it the way a book says, doesn't mean it's not therapeutic. No, it just means you're meeting your individual, unique child's needs and your own unique needs. So, and what about the post-its then? So is that like a smaller version?
Yeah, just the same idea. It can be a bit more spontaneous, I suppose. You can manage that just in a different way. Again, some children and some parents wouldn't like to have it all collected together in a book. No, that feels a bit like almost a bit of a responsibility, I suppose. It's a bit more permanent, whereas post-its, by their nature, are just
fleeting.
A quick thing. So you can put them a bit more portable as well. They can go in a bag, or they can.
And how do you use? I'm trying to think in terms of practice.
Oh, okay.
Never heard of it before.
Yeah.
How does it practically? What is the? Because I am seeing my son would love, because he tends to leave us notes now.
Okay.
Coming from a very aggressive place to a slightly better place, to be dipping in and out of it.
Yeah.
Actually, he uses paper and pen.
Okay. So
if he's really cross, we get "I hate you," the usual swear, swear words thrown down the stairs. Yeah. But we also get the "I love you," "You're the best." Yeah. Brilliant. So is it essentially that, or
I guess lots of these things, I think they need a bit of setting up in a calm time. Yeah. So it's a bit like contracts, not a contract at all, but it's a bit like you use it, like you were saying, it fits your family. Yeah. So it's just a means to an end. It's just you would talk with your child about, "I've had this idea, how about it?" You'd need to start, probably, but that would be okay. Find a place to leave them. I don't know. It's worked differently in different families completely.
No, and I can see the idea.
They're very portable, and again, they're little, so you can store them somewhere easily if you want to store them, or they're kind of designed to be disposable. So if you write something and you regret that, or your child does,
exactly, I'm thinking that would work really well.
It's gone. Whereas in a book, you'd have to rip the page out or scribble over it, and that
might not work for some people.
No.
Because it's always about us. For me, it's always about knowing that feelings change all the time, and it's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're allowed to hate me right now. Yeah, because you do, and that's okay. Yes. But you're not going to hate me maybe in an hour's time.
No.
So I'm thinking maybe actually a post-it, they're allowed to go. Are you allowed to love me right now? You might not in a minute.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I quite like that idea of fleeting, that permission to move on and change and feel different things at different times.
What I think is that there are a million ways to do therapeutic parenting, just like there are a million ways to be people. There's many ways, and each child is different, and even in one family, one child is going to need something different from the other. So you might have two children, and one might love a book because they're able to tolerate writing and keeping hold of unpleasant things, or they just don't need to write that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And another one just couldn't do that, and so that's why it's so helpful to have so many different ideas, I guess. And so many, like I said, so many of mine have come from parents who said, "Oh, I tried this, and actually, so far it's working really well."
Yeah.
But I guess as long as you keep hold of this, so the paper, the book, the post-it, the whatever, is just a means to the curiosity. It can't become it can't
be the way of only way of communicating.
No, absolutely not. And it's not the strategy in itself.
No.
It's not. So Joe posted note therapy, whatever, but it's not that.
Yeah.
It's just a way of using the curiosity that works with some
and being able to bear it.
Yeah.
Because some can't bear it.
No.
And I just remember what I was going to say then.
Cool.
It's also another way of showing that you're holding them in mind, because I don't know, but sometimes if you're carrying all that anger and hate and all those really difficult feelings and you're not sure why, because it's body memory and not cognitive memory, I suppose sometimes you think, I'm going to break this, it's going to go too far and I don't know how to stop it. Yeah. Something like that might be a gentle way of showing that you're holding them in mind. Yeah. I don't know.
I think so. But I suppose when I was talking earlier about setting it up in a calm time, when I've known it worked best, particularly for younger children, so children still in primary, almost it's worked best when families have managed to kind of almost create a bit of a code. So set up not rules, that makes it sound all too formal, but some idea of, so that like you don't have to write a big essay or you don't have to say a big essay, but you've got like shortcuts. So for example, it looks like you're feeling fizzy. We already would know what fizzy meant.
Yeah, so that it's not a new word that they don't understand what you mean.
Or you look like you're in the red zone. That would have been something that was already established and understood.
So familiar.
Yeah. So that you don't need then lots of language. Because I love language, you can tell. I'm talking a lot. And I could talk till the cows come home. But in those times, and you know it too,
language doesn't.
Too many words, it's just too much. But you do need some. And you need some, like families have their own jargon, I would think. I do in my own family. We've got all sorts of funny names for things that are different in our friends' houses and stuff. And it's the same with this kind of stuff, that children define and parents define children's behaviour or their moods or what they know about them using their own kind of lexicon, which is lovely as long as everybody understands
if everyone understands
what they
the
mean.
language.
So then you can use all sorts of shortcuts, or you might even just use colours. You're having a green day, you're having a blue day, you're having a snowy day. People use the weather. We talked about that earlier. I think there's all sorts of ways of doing it. But those are the things that kind of have to be established before. And this kind of way of, particularly with the books and the post-its, works best if you've got those kind of shortcuts in place already, I think.
And I suppose that may be where, you correct me if I'm wrong, if sometimes it can feel like something's not working, if we've heard something on a podcast or read something in a book and we haven't done that pre-work.
Yes.
Maybe that's why sometimes it feels like nothing works. Yeah. That phrase I feel like I hear a lot. Nothing works. Yes. Whereas actually it may work if
you set it up.
That work was done before. Not all the time, with certain strategies or ideas.
Yes, and sometimes that happens in therapy, if you've got parents and children in therapy together. I know some families I'm working with and others where that is part of the work in the therapy session, and then they're doing the rest of the stuff at home. Yeah. Sometimes parents just figure that out for themselves. Again, there's no rule for it. Yeah. But I think, yes, expecting it's part of that waiting curiosity again to kind of say you need to. We always need to be one step ahead of our children, ideally.
Yeah.
And when they get one step ahead of us, or where they're inferring all sorts of intentions on us that aren't in our minds, that's when things, I think, often start to get wrong. And if you don't realise that's what's going on, it's so easy to dig yourself into a bigger and bigger hole with that. And it's happened to me in therapy before as well, where you kind of you're going along and you're working hard because you're kind of a bit wedded to your formulation, and it's just not shifting. And then when you pause and think, what does this child make of what I'm saying or doing? And if you can do that work with the child, that's often the thing that will unlock the kind of the gate to go through to the next phase. It's often like, I went to the safari park the other week, and they have those holding bits.
Yes.
So you go through the lions, and then the next bit is the gazelles, and they don't want the lions to get with the gazelles. So,
or the humans,
So you go into this weird holding zone, and sometimes I feel like you get in one of those where you're not with the lions, but you're not yet with the gazelles. In therapy, but also at home, parents kind of often describe, I was doing this thing and it was working really well, and I know I think I need to move on to something else, but I don't know what that thing is yet. I haven't figured out the next thing that my child or our family needs. It's a bit like being in that weird holding zone. But I think often the key to moving forward is that thinking about the motivation, and your child's moved to a different developmental stage, or they've understood something about you differently, or misunderstood something. You've not yet understood something about them. Yeah. So really combining, I suppose, the curiosity with the mentalizing, they're similar but not the same, I think is really key to thinking about it. Curiosity is not just an outward kind of external thing. It's very much trying to put your mind on their mind and vice versa.
And that's really interesting, because I think, I wonder if curiosity has been pitched at that level of, I wonder if you're feeling like this, which of course a little bit of it is. Yeah. But I think that may be where curiosity's got a bit muddled up. And actually the way you're describing it makes more sense. That whole world curiosity, every aspect, and of your own self as well. Yeah. Because that sounds like that's just as important to be curious about yourself.
It's a massive ask if we think about it. So you've got to understand yourself, and then you've got to understand or have a good guess at what your child might understand about you. Yeah. And then you've got to understand what your child understands about themselves. Yeah.
It's a lot of curiosity. It's a lot of being curious.
It is, and that's a big cognitive ask as well as a big emotional ask. It's no mean feat. If people, anybody, not just adoptive parents or people in therapy, if anybody can do that stuff,
it's a big
all the time, or most of the time,
actually,
it is a big project. We're asking a lot, but I know that when I have worked with families, and in my own life as well, when I've managed to get those things all aligned, that's when things go best.
So I find it easy to be curious about me. Yeah. This is just for me, not everyone would feel this way, but I find it easy to be curious about me, and I find it easy to be curious about them. Yeah. What I find tricky is being curious or being aware of how I am perceived in their eyes. Yeah. And you're saying that's the linchpin to...
For some families, I really think it is, because otherwise you can be going down all sorts of faulty tracks. Yeah. Because of course your child probably doesn't know that that's what's influencing them.
No, of course not.
So they can only be helped to be free from that if you know what they might be thinking. Yeah. So if they think that you don't let them watch telly for 4 hours a night because you're mean and because you want them to have a bad life, then they're always going to react to that in quite a dramatic way.
Yeah, of course they are.
But if that's their basic assumption about your behaviour, that it's motivated by your meanness, they're going to have a different response to that than if they even though they'd still want to watch telly all night.
And they still might be grumpy about it. If they understand it.
But if they think, or if they understand that your motivation is a good one, because actually you know that watching telly for 4 hours of an evening makes them kind of lethargic and isn't good for them, and it would be much better to be spending time together, particularly closer to bedtime.
Yeah.
And that's a long thing to explain, but if they get that, then
it changes the context for them.
Changes it.
So, where would the first starting point be for you if you are trying to work out how to be curious about your child's perception of you?
Yeah.
Where would you start?
So I think you probably would start in a behaviour that seems, so a response to something you do that seems out of proportion to you.
Oh, okay. So an explosion, maybe back to the TV example, an explosion of the TV, and you're thinking, this is nuts, you've absolutely lost it.
Because all children would probably be grumpy, or most children would be grumpy that you're setting limits about screen time.
Yeah.
But if it's catastrophic, if it feels like the end of the world to your child, when most children would be like,
there could be a glitch there with the way you're perceived.
Absolutely. There's some assumption going on that is a misassumption. There's a misinterpretation of
That's fascinating. I think that could be really helpful.
And it links with the comic strip as well. So it's that kind of thing. So just thinking about what could it mean instead. And again, if kids will often give us brilliant clues. So they'll say, "Oh, hey, you're so mean." And
there's
and it does mean that. They do mean that. But if that then carries on into a kind of punishing response from them for the whole night or even the next day, then that's probably a better clue that actually what they're carrying with them is that you also mean. Rather than another kid who might shout that at you, but then 20 minutes later we'll move on, we'll get on with the rest of the evening, and actually isn't holding that against you at all. Because they understand.
Of course, which I see a lot in a lot of the relationships I see, is this out of proportion behaviour. And so, would you say all of it or some of it?
No.
So some of it.
Some of it. Or for some young people, that's a bigger part of it than others. For some young people, it's not that. It's trauma trigger or it's different. But for lots of young people, I think it is that they've made a faulty assumption about why you're setting a limit or why you're saying that they need to do such a thing or can't do something else.
So it can't, and it won't hurt to be curious.
No,
because
not at all.
Even if it's not that, you've been curious and thought about.
Yeah. And also a good clue if you're parenting together is if you get different responses to different parents. So if your child responds quite differently, it may be that they're making one set of assumptions about you and a different set of assumptions about the other parent.
Yeah.
And that, that's for all sorts of reasons. If they've had particular, like gender-based or mum-based or dad-based experiences in the past, they can carry those with them and hold on to the kind of faulty logic, as it were.
And that's a wider. Would that be a wider set of path? What am I trying to say? So, say you need to alter. You've been curious and you think they are believing this about me, when actually this is it, and maybe you can correct a little thing.
Yeah.
If it's a wider past thing, would that be more work, or would it be?
I think it's just more steps.
More steps.
Yeah. You might need to start somewhere and the journey would be longer.
But it's still the same.
It's the same
perception.
Yeah, the same things. And the only way, well, in my experience, the only way to do something about it is to recognise it, watch in your curious way for a while before you speak it out loud, check it out with your partner.
Hold that waiting again.
Yeah, or if you are working with a therapist, take it to the therapist and say, I'm wondering if, and then figure it out together. And only when you can't be 100% sure, but only when you feel a bit more comfortable in your own mind that might be something that's going on, would you start to try and explore that with the child themselves, I think.
So it's also waiting.
Yeah, it is.
Going back to that curious waiting, active waiting.
Again, you could probably ask every single different therapist on the team, and there's a lot of us now, and they'd say something different or add something to it. Or say, no, I didn't agree with that bit. That's not how I see it at all. But those are my thoughts.
Yeah.
Some of them.
Thank you.